back to the On The Ball podcast. This is episode 121 of the show, and I'm back once again to talk about the greatest game of all rugby league. Another NRL review coming right up. We will be chatting about the week, round 5. I always say week 5, that's a bit more of an NFL thing, isn't it? But we'll be chatting about round 5. Once again, didn't catch every single game, so you will have to excuse me just leaving some games out, but the cricket season is now over, so I will basically be able to watch every game from here on in, which I am so keen for. But we're going to go through a bit of a usual structure. Probably won't be the longest episode today, as I'm doing this on Wednesday night, so a bit later than normal. But we will be going through the similar structure. Obviously, the huge news in NRL right now is that John Morris has been removed immediately. There was obviously reports come out that they were going after Craig Fitzgibbons, and then 24 hours later, bang, John Morris is gone. Fitzgibbons signed for next year, and Josh Hannay is the intermediate coach, or the caretaker coach, interim coach, not intermediate. So we'll be talking about some of the harshest coach sackings of all time, mid-season coach sackings, and in a little bit. But first of all, we're going to touch on the winners and losers, as we always do at the start of the episode. So the biggest winner this weekend, in my opinion, is the mighty St. George Illawarra Dragons. They upset the Parramatta Eels at Bankwest in really impressive fashion. I think this was actually my sure bet of the week last week, which that's left me with egg on my face. But yeah, they just playing so aggressively right now in attack, but also in defence, which is really, really good to see. It's always a sign of a good team. You see teams like Tigers and Cowboys, for an example. There's not many times where, they get up in the face of the attack, where the Dragons were all over the Eels. They were pushing blokes behind the try line. They were pushing blokes over the sideline. They were hunting in packs. It was just really good to watch. Paul Vaughan, he had an absolute stellar game. I think he picked up the 3 Dally M votes. He had almost over 100 post-contact meters, which is incredible when you factor in that some people struggle to get 100 contact meters in general, let alone just post-contact, so he was huge. Some of the other players, I think Clune got the 2 Dally M points. He steered the boys around really well. Dufty had a couple line break assists, a couple try assists, and a line break himself. And yeah, they're just trucking along very nicely. Everyone is doing their job well. They've always had a pretty good list, St. George, the last couple of years. They've just been underperforming, so it's not the most ridiculous thing that how well they're playing, but a lot of the guys who would be seen as role players are performing a lot better than you'd expect, like folks like Daniel Alvaro, Terrell Fuimaono. They're all having blinding starts to the year. And without Ben Hunt, I think that's been really impressive. I thought when Ben Hunt went down, they would have a huge lull in their performance, but Clune stepped in, who I think is one of the better backup halves in the competition, and he's made the transition seamless, really. And then Ben Hunt's going to be back in a couple of weeks, so you think they're just going to go from strength to strength. In terms of what they're doing really well right now, it's obviously their defence has been awesome to start the season, but their attack as well. They've scored the 5th most points in the competition. Zach Lomax has been the best goal kicker. I think he's completing at 96%, or converting at 96%, which is just insane. And looking forward for them, they have the Warriors this week, so that's a winnable game, the way they've been playing. Then they've got the Roosters for Anzac Day, which is a tough one for them, but the form they're in right now wouldn't write it off. And then they've got the Tigers and Dogs, which, based on the forms of those 3 teams right now, you would say that's 2 Dragons victories. So they could easily be sitting at the back end of round 9 with 7-2 record, and at that stage, you can't really leave them out of your top 8. So it's been an incredible start to Anthony Griffin's tenure at St. George, and yeah, I hope they keep it up because they're very good to watch right now. The other big winner I'm going to talk about is the Titans. Yes, the Knights were extremely undermanned with their injury crisis at the moment, but the way they just comfortably dispatched them, I think they scored 42 points or something after a disappointing loss to the Raiders the week before, just showed that I think they're a lock for the top 8 this year. They're just going to have to dispatch those teams that they should. And I don't think they're going to do too much damage in finals, if I'm completely honest, but I think they're a lock because they're just going to beat the teams below them or the teams they're expected to beat, which is exactly what they did. They have scored the 5th most tries in the competition. They've got the 2nd most line breaks and 5th most metres. So their forwards up the middle have been absolutely unreal. David Fafita scored a hat-trick on the weekend, which is just unheard of. Tino's been as good as a signing as we all thought he was going to be. And yeah, they've just got real players that can just tear up a game, which is really good to see. And I think Ash Taylor's back this weekend. I don't think he played last week. So the fact that they were winning games without their starting halves is very impressive. And looking forward for the Gold Coast Titans, they've got Manly this week, which they view as a very winnable game. Then they've got the Rabbitohs, which is a tough one. But then they've got the Broncos and Tigers. So similar to the Dragons, could easily go through 3-1 in this next month. And that would see them sitting at 6-3, which you'd think would have them just outside, if not in the top 4. So they've had a very promising start to the year. And you see it a lot in almost every sport. There's these young teams that a lot of them have only been at the club for a couple of years. They've got a new coach. Often the hype can be too much for them and they disappoint. But they are certainly living up to their expectations so far this season, and they look like they're going to be a player in the September finals for the NRL, which is really exciting if you're a Gold Coast fan. Moving on to the losers. Look, I'll save my Tigers for last because that was... don't get me started, but I'll try and keep my train of thought for the other teams first. But the Newcastle Knights, yes, just talked up the Titans, but it was pretty disappointing from them. The fact that they've just been dispatched by them. They've just not started life post-Mitchell Pearce well at all, have they? They're now sitting outside the top 8. I think they're in 11th. They've got the Sharks, Panthers, Roosters and Raiders in the next month. So if they're getting one win there, that's probably a good effort. Could easily go winless over their next month, which would see them go 2-7. And from there, it's going to be a long climb back to finals even with injury players returning. This week they are bolstered by the likes of Kurt Mann coming back, Jacob Saifidi's coming back into the team, Bradman Best is back. So I think they're a chance against the Sharks. They're actually going in as favourites, according to Sportsbet. But I think it's going to be a tough one after the whole John Morris controversy. The Sharks could come out and really try and tear the Knights a new one in kind of, not in boycott, but like in response to John Morris's sacking, if you know what I mean. And then the following 3 weeks, they're up against 3 of the genuine competition heavyweights. So, yeah, it's a big week for the Knights this week against the Sharks. It's almost a must-win, which sounds outrageous in round 6, but at the point where they are in their stage, the point where they are at this stage of the season, I don't know why I can't talk today, but without Mitchell Pearce, without a few other key players, they've got to win this. They can't be going 2-7. They're not going to make finals if they're 2-7. So this is almost a must-win for them. All right, and then moving on to my West Tigers. Oh, where do we even start? It was an absolute shocker, wasn't it? Everyone's talking about it, which is rightly so. I do think a lot of the times the Tigers go under the radar in terms of some of their bad performances, because they never come last, really, do they? They always just come like 10th, 11th, 12th, 9th. So they're usually pretty irrelevant, but I think it's about time we shine the light on the Tigers and like what goes on in that place. If you don't know, I'm a Tigers diehard. It was just probably one of the worst halves of footy I've ever seen from any team in that first half. Absolutely disgraceful. The Cowboys, it felt as though they were bloody scoring every set at some stages. I think they scored 5 tries, maybe 6. It was just horrid. Pretty much half the team had a shocking game, so I'm not even going to pick out specific players because we'd be here all day. But yeah, it was just so disappointing, especially on such a big occasion. Obviously, the passing of the legend that is Tommy Raudonikis last week, of Western Suburbs fame, and the joint venture club just could not do anything in the honour of the great man. So that really sucked. There was a big crowd at Leichhardt. It was humming, coming up against a completely out of form team. And to ship 5 or 6 tries in that first half, don't even really need to say anymore. That's just crap, isn't it? They've now conceded 160 points for the year. Only 3 teams are worse, and they're the 3 teams below them on the ladder, which is the Bulldogs, the Cowboys, and the Seagulls. So that's something not to be proud of. Tigers now sit in 13th, and you can't really argue they don't you can't argue they deserve to be higher at this point of the season. Yes, the Broncos haven't started well either, but I think they're in 12th. But they have played a lot harder teams than the Tigers have had to, and they haven't been shipping as many points. So, yeah, really disappointing for the Tigers. A lot of people came into this season with optimism. I'll be honest, I actually didn't come into the year with optimism. I thought that was pretty false hope, because I don't actually think the team had improved that much for 2021. I think there were some good signings for the future, like Dane Laurie, but I don't think it was going to have too much effect this year. And so far, I've been proven right. To be honest, a little bit disappointing, the lack of changes to the lineup. I think blokes like Tom Amone should get a crack from reserve grade. He was really positive in the few appearances he made at the Rabbitohs, but he's still in the reserves for now. They did bring in Jai Simpkin, which is about time. I heard about this kid for like 2 years. Jacob Little, not really a big fan. He reminds me of, I don't want to bring anyone else down here, but Cameron McInnes. They're very solid in defence, but they just don't bring a spark to the attack, which nowadays your fullback and your hooker are almost as important in terms of creativity as your halfback and 5'8" are. You look at teams like Souths, even the Storm with Harry Grant and the Cheese, your hooker's one of your most creative players. So yes, they've got to obviously be good in defence, but Little just wasn't really doing that for us. And it probably doesn't help when your halves aren't great, but I'm excited to see what the Simpkin kid brings to the team. Obviously, huge expectations, so I do feel bad for him. It's not an easy job to step into a team with fans that are already fuming, but good luck to him. Kapoa comes back into the side. Yes, he killed it in reserve grade statistically, but after what he's shown in first grade, it'll be interesting. He is playing in the centres, which I don't think we've seen from him. I think he's always been on the wing, so I don't know, that might help him out, but we'll have to wait and see for that. But yeah, a few guys playing for their spots in the next few weeks. Blokes like James Roberts and stuff like that, they've just not been good so far. There's been a few shuffles in terms of who's on the bench and who's starting. I think Garner and Musgrove both go back to the bench. I forgot how they say it. I'll just say Utokamanu, but I've forgotten how they actually pronounce it. But he comes into the starting lineup, which is exciting. Off Hengao, he goes to the back row, which is real strange to me. I think he's been really pretty average since round one. But look, it doesn't get any easier for the Tigers. They've got the Rabbitohs up next week, which is a really, really big game. Obviously up against the former legend, well, he's still a legend, but Benji Marshall, and Michael Maguire's old team. Look, the Rabbitohs are going to win. I don't think that's a question. It's just a matter of how much they win by. The Tigers have got to be really competitive. I think if the Tigers can keep it within 20 points, it's actually a pretty good showing from them. So that's, for me, what the threshold is. I think if they lose by more than 20, then that's a little bit disappointing. But yeah, and I also want to address something. Everyone who's saying, I listened to a podcast today and they were saying, yes, Benji might have been treated poorly in terms of the fact that he heard it through the media that he wasn't getting re-signed. Yeah, I agree, that's horrible. I heard Sean Johnson, the same thing happened to him, that's bad. But in terms of a tactical point of view, people who are saying Tigers shouldn't have let him go and that he would have fixed the Tigers is completely false. He's hardly had to make a tackle all year for the Rabbitohs. He's got the best defenders either side of him. If you go back and watch a Tigers game last year for 80 minutes, don't just watch the highlights, you'll realise how much of a liability that bloke is. So getting a little bit fed up with people saying if the Tigers didn't let Benji Marshall go, they wouldn't be in the hole they're in this year, which is just completely false because he'd be missing all the tackles that everyone is missing right now. And yes, he's playing really well for the Rabbitohs, but that's because his defence isn't really under the microscope because he's got 12 other great defenders out there with him and they are basically always on the front foot in terms of the field position, so he's not having to make crucial tackles. But I'm sure Melbourne and the Roosters will shine a light on his defence coming up in the next few months, which I'm excited for, to be honest. But yeah, I don't want to talk too much about the Tigers because it's pretty doom and gloom at the moment and it's worked me up just thinking about it again. I've kind of put it to the back of my mind, but this has brought it back up, which hurts. But yeah, really big couple of weeks for Madge especially, and the Tigers. Yes, the Tigers have not been victims, but they've been perpetrators, I guess, in sacking coaches too often. But it gets to the stage where if Madge doesn't show improvement for the rest of the year, well, then you've almost got to start looking at him again, which is not ideal because you don't want to keep just going around and around with coaches. But at some stage, there's just something wrong with the club. I think the culture's crap or something like that, but who knows? We're not really lucky enough to see into it. Alright, moving on to my predicted top 8. Not many changes this week because most of the favourites did get up, which seems to be a trend in the NRL right now. The Storm had a big win over the Bulldogs, so they're still my number 1. The Rabbitohs had a big win over the Broncos, they're still my number 2. Panthers had an impressive victory over the Raiders. However, the reason I didn't touch on them in my winners is I do think that injury to Shans was massive. Made them completely reshuffle their whole lineup. Maybe showed that the Raiders need to carry a utility back or something on the bench because, Croak out on the wing just didn't work. Rapana was knackered by 50 minutes of fullback, but still well done to the Panthers. The Eels, yes, they did lose a disappointing game to the Dragons, but I still think they're going to finish ahead of the Raiders and the Roosters. I think they'll just be more consistent. I've got the Raiders in 5th still. Yes, it was very disappointing, but I don't know. The Roosters just keep suffering injuries, and yes, Sam Walker had an absolute blinder on the weekend, but I will trust the Raiders to be more consistent than this young Roosters team. Well, young in terms of the key positions. So I've got the Roosters 6th, then I've got the Titans 7th. I don't know if I'll ever move them from 7th. I just don't think they're good enough to challenge that top 6, but the way they're playing right now, who knows? And then I've had one change. I was going to leave it unchanged, but I thought the Dragons are 4-1. They've got an easy draw coming up. I think I've got to move them in there. So I have sadly taken out the Sharks. I just think that the whole coaching controversy, it might work well in terms of the boys might be fired up in the next couple of weeks, but I think in the long term, it's going to have a negative impact on their ceiling this year. So I've got them just outside the 8 right now, and then there's a massive drop off to 10th. I don't even know who 10th would be, probably the Warriors. But yeah, I've got the Dragons in 8th right now, but it's pretty crazy to think the Dragons or the Sharks will miss out the way both teams are playing at the minute. Alright, the list segment. I'm now looking at the top 7 harshest mid-season coach sackings since 2010. Sounds very niche, but they're all pretty well-known things. Alright, starting off at number 7, I'll be honest, I actually didn't think this was harsh at the time, but statistically it's up there with one of the harsher ones, but it does get a lot harsher as you go up to number 1. I've got Jason Taylor, who, as a Tigers fan, I didn't really like him, but he's made the list. Got sacked in 2017, had a 38... I've had calculated the win percentage from their last 50 games ahead of the club. So if they coach more than 3 seasons, well then that's why their win percentage might be a little bit different to what it is on Wikipedia or something. But he had a 38% win percentage. Obviously the West Tigers came 9th in 2016, so the year before he got sacked, and he only lasted 3 games in 2017. So that's why I'm saying it's unlucky. 9th in 2016, yes, they had some very good players. This is when the Big Four still played at the Tigers, but to only last 3 games in 2017, they didn't really give him a chance. Could have supposedly springboarded them into the 8. He was replaced by Ivan Cleary, who seems to be a bloody common theme on this list. He replaces a lot of these people. But the main thing with Jason Taylor was the off-field issues. The players didn't like him. Robbie Farah didn't like him, which I think was a big thing for the Tigers. I think Robbie Farah was a leader of the dressing room. And the Big Four, Tedesco, Woods, Moses Brooks, they didn't want to re-sign if he was still going to be there. And that was a big reason why 3 of them ended up leaving the club, because Taylor did carry on into 2017. So, yes, I do think he wasn't actually that bad in terms of on-field performance. But I do get why they sacked him. But maybe give him a few more games than 3. Or sack him before he lets the future of the club leave, but that's another issue for another day. Alright, number 6, I've got Neil Henry. He was in charge of the Gold Coast Titans. He got sacked in the same season in 2017. And now, if you think about it with hindsight, you think it's a good move because now they've got Justin Holbrook and everything's on the up. But the coach in between, Garth Brennan, wasn't great. He had a 40% win record. He made the finals the year prior in 2016, which was pretty rare for the Titans. But the reason he got sacked was he had a falling out with Jared Hayne, and that saw the rest of the team basically take Jared Hayne's side, and then they all wanted Neil Henry out, which is pretty controversial, but yeah, it's pretty stiff with a 40% win record to get kicked out of the club. Number 5, he's actually got 2 appearances in this list, but it's Matthew Elliott. This is at his Warriors stint. I was just talking to my older brother about it, and he said he's just known around the traps as a crap coach, but statistically he's not, so I don't know about that. But he got sacked in 2014. He had a 45% win rate, which is pretty handy. Came 11th in the 2013 season, but that doesn't sound great, but he came into a team that was 14th. So realistically, he improved in 3 positions, and who knows what was going to happen in 2014. They could have kept going up and up. So he was replaced by Andrew McFadden, who didn't last long himself. So I think that might have been a bit premature, and maybe that's something they live to rue today. But number 4, I've gone with another Warriors sacking, and that's Stephen Kearney. He was sacked last year in 2020 during the COVID when the Warriors were over here at the Central Coast. He had a 42% win record, so not as good as Matthew Elliott, but the timing of it was so stiff. I think they'd actually won the week he got sacked. They were living away from home. All the players were in a bubble together. No family, no friends, no home games. And to sack him in the middle of that, it was pretty bad timing. Thought it was a pretty poor decision. Yes, they've brought in Nathan Brown and Gus Gould. They made good signings. So in hindsight, it looks like a good move. And Todd Payton did good things after his removal. But yeah, it seemed pretty stiff at the time. Number 3, I've got the man in the moment, the man in the hour, John Morris, a beloved figure at Cronulla, 300-game veteran. Didn't play all of it for Cronulla, but so he's held with high regard across the league. He got sacked this week, obviously. He had a 48% win record, which is pretty great. In his 2 seasons at the helm, he made the finals. So, yes, in both of them, I think one of them they won a finals game, but I think 2019 they won a finals game, actually. But 2020, they were kind of just making up the numbers. I don't think they beat a top 8 side. So, I guess you can argue that's not a great record, but still, to make the finals, it's hard to be too harsh unless you make the finals like 5 times and just show no signs of progress. Brad Arthur, nah, that's stiff. Cool. That's sorry. Apologies, Parramatta fans, don't get too mad at me. But he's getting replaced by Craig Fitzgibbon, which is another reason why this is very harsh, because he's never coached an NRL team before. He came in, he was thrown into the deep end because Shane Flanagan got suspended. He didn't have the full salary cap, and Bronson Xerri, who was the club's up-and-coming future star, got banned for steroids. So a lot of unfavourable conditions, and in the end he got the club to 2 finals appearances and had a really good start to this year. So that's definitely right up there with one of the most savage sackings. Number 2, I've got Matty Elliott. This is his early one at Penrith in 2011. He got replaced by Ivan Cleary yet again, who seems to be the boogeyman, or what's that? The Grim Reaper. 48% win record, so same as John Morris. But he came second in the year before he got sacked. So I think he got sacked like 10 weeks into 2011, and they weren't going that great. But he came second the year before. Surely he knew what he was doing if they came second. So that's pretty weird. I obviously don't remember at the time because I was only 10 years old. But that's pretty wild. Anthony Griffin's the number 1 man. He had a 60% win record, got sacked in 2018. This was by the Panthers yet again, so they're obviously a bit of a savage organisation. But hey, look at them now. It's obviously worked well for them. He made finals in both of his full years at the club, so 2016 and 2017. The reason he got sacked was he had a huge fallout with Gus Gould. Gus Gould said he was like an old-fashioned coach who didn't know how to coach in the modern era. Have a look at him now. He is coaching a 4-1 side. He obviously got replaced by Ivan Cleary. But yeah, 60% win record, that's pretty bloody brutal. I don't know what the Trent Robinsons and Craig Bellamy's win records is, but I could imagine theirs isn't any bigger than 70. So 60 is pretty elite. And for him to get removed, very, very stiff. I do recall their finals, I don't remember them exactly, but if this is the time where James Maloney was at Penrith, yes, they were making finals, but they weren't that good in the finals matches. I remember one where Nathan Cleary was a baby. This is probably actually after Anthony Griffin got sacked, but they didn't look like winning a game in finals. But still, similar to John Morris, to make finals both years, obviously Gus Gould and their relationship had a huge impact, but yeah, very, very stiff Anthony Griffin. But thankfully he's getting his chance now, and he's absolutely killing it. So that's the top 10 most savage sackings, mid-season sackings in the last 10 years. Let me know in the comments if you think there's any other stiff ones or ones from your club that I've missed, or even from the past before 2010 that I might not be aware of. Let me know, because it is an interesting world, the mid-season sacking. I really enjoy that list segment. I'm going to keep thinking about them. I might be doing a few draft ones where I think of like, if there was a draft in 2018, so players born in this year, what would the draft order be? That would be an interesting concept, and which team they would have gone to. So that's something I might be doing in the future. But I'm not going to do a players or rookie of the week this week. Just going straight into my round 6 preview. So we're going to be looking at my sure bet of the week, and I'm going, look, let's be real. There's quite a few sure bets each week at the moment. The Panthers to beat the Broncos, surely the Panthers get up against the Broncos. I mean, come on. It just has to happen. Yes, it is at Suncorp. That's one thing that maybe makes me not as confident, but like, they're paying $1.03, the Panthers. They've had no outs this week. Obviously, Coruscant and Edwards are still out, but no outs from last week. The Broncos, they've had a couple of changes, obviously reshuffled the side following their pretty poor start to the year. So, yeah, surely the Panthers have to beat the Broncos. My upset of the week, I think there's quite a few good ones this week. I think it's going to be a really exciting round, actually, compared to previous rounds. I'm going the Bulldogs to beat the Cowboys on the last match of the weekend. It's like the Sunday 6 o'clock game. It is in Townsville, so that's a tough one for the Bulldogs, but the Bulldogs have to get off the mark at some stage. Sorry, I'm about to call. And they're paying $2.75. But the Cowboys, yes, they did get their first win against the Tigers, so fair play to them. I don't think they look good. The Tigers were absolutely storming home in the second half, and we weren't even playing well. Their defence looked as crap as ever. Yes, they had a few moments of brilliance in attack, like Scotty Drinkwater's chip and chase, Hamiso's running ability. He's also out this week, but that's not that massive, but you know what I mean. I just think maybe the Cowboys are a bit less hungry. They've got their win. I just think if the Bulldogs are going to win, this is one of the games that they're likely to win. Otherwise, they're just not going to win many all season. So I'm going them, but the Sharks are underdogs against the Knights. I think that's a very interesting one, even though it is at the Knights ground. Manly against the Titans, and look, Titans should win it. I've got them being a top 8 team. I keep saying that they're going to win all the games they need to win this year, but Tommy T back, I think that's honestly a huge boost for them. Not just what he brings, but I think also like psychologically. I think when he's back, everyone's up and about. Other ones, Eels are underdogs against the Raiders. I think that's a smoky. The Warriors are underdogs against the Dragons. That could perceivably happen as well. In terms of the game spreads I like Bulldogs with the line, so plus 6.5. I've obviously picked them in head-to-head. But I also like the Broncos with plus 28.5. I don't know, yes, they've not been... The scoreline hasn't been close in the last couple of weeks for the Broncos, but it is at home, and... I know this sounds so weird because they got smashed, but I swear the game I watched them against the Storm, they weren't even that bad. I just think they were all right, and they've made some changes. There's some guys who are playing for their spot and future. I just think they might be a little bit more competitive against the Panthers like they were in round 1 against the Eels, who are definitely a different gravy to the Panthers, but... Yeah, 28.5, that's a big margin. So even if they lose by 25, we're taking it home. So I think that's some pretty solid value there. And I like the Broncos to lose by less than 29 points, which just sounds ridiculous. But, So, it's only a really short episode today. Hardly even going to crack over the half an hour mark. But a little bit ill, busy uni schedule. So I've just thought I'd pump it out. Tipping's going to be very hard this week. I haven't locked in my tips yet, and I'm not sure what I'm going to go with all those upset chances I mentioned before. But thanks for tuning in. I hope you're enjoying all the content coming at the moment, pardon me. Really looking forward to more NRL and AFL content now that the cricket season's over. I'm keen to just dive into it. Looking forward to uni holidays as well for the podcast. I think could start doing 2 a week for each sport potentially, but go the Tigers. Please don't get smashed by 50 this week against Benji Marshall. And good luck to your teams. Yep, thanks for listening. Thanks for watching. Leave a like, comment, subscribe, or follow if you're listening. And we'll see you next week. Cheers.